Hi there, my name is Joe Martin. I'm pastor at First Baptist Church in Toledo, and I apologize that there haven't been any cabin talks for a little bit. A lot of different things going on in our lives and in the life of our community. Now, remember, I have been doing, along with these, a Wednesday night Bible study. It's been really great. But those will be those are last week was the last week for those, so there'll be some cabin talks going along, but they'll be a little bit intermittent because I'm up in the mountains setting up for camp, for man camp, vacation Bible school, kids camp, and different things. So there's a lot of different things going on, and so just keep aware that you'll get the notices for them, and you can watch them. But I want to talk to you today about something that's so important, especially this time of year. These are the choices that you make. Lives are really the outcome of choices that we make. And I want to talk to you about the choices that you have to make, three choices that you have to make to follow, and not just follow Jesus, but flourish as a disciple of Jesus. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to do something that probably, if you're watching this, might be not your, you'll have a tendency to not want to listen to this. You've got to choose community over isolation. And it's never been easier to kind of be isolated. Now, this has been going along for kind of developing for a long time, but it's never been easier, especially it was already happening, but then during the pandemic period where people were kind of being encouraged to isolate, it's never been easier and in some ways more attractive to isolate. You don't have to leave your house for anything. If you want entertainment, you've got Netflix or Hulu or Prime or Disney for your kids. If you need food, you can have it delivered. Or even groceries. I guess you can even get your groceries delivered. Most of the big chains do it. You want music. It used to be back in the day, you had to sit on the porch with grandma, or you had to go to the Grange Hall or to the dance hall or to the club. Now, or you had to learn how to play an instrument and play with other people. Now you have 10,000 songs on your playlist, and you can listen to it all, anything you want to all day long. You always have a soundtrack going. Could be games. You used to sit down and have to find the cards and the pieces, and now, by the time a lot of young men are in the early 20s, they play 10,000 hours of games. They don't even have to get together with their friends to do that. They can just do it online. And church is, and those of you that are watching this, I really appreciate you doing this. And many of you have been super generous in your giving, because it does help us. But, unless you're not able, and I realize for some of you, you're not, it's not the same experience, you listening to me, looking at me as a screen, than it is being with other people. It's not the same encounter. It doesn't accomplish the same thing in growing you and kind of pushing you out of your space to have to love people. That's going on. Even in the most intimate kind of things like dating, used to be all the insecurity and everything about dating. Now you don't have to leave your home. As a matter of fact, I hear one dating site is actually developing an AI concierge service where you can load all your information in, and it will pick the perfect person for you, all your insecurities, all your history, everything. As a matter of fact, for the most part, carpools are gone for a couple reasons. One is people just drive individual cars. In large cities, most of the people commuting to work are alone. And also, the other reason is people work from home. What they call the Zoom boom. As a matter of fact, where we live in a rural area, beautiful place like Toledo, a lot of people, the housing market has really, the cost has gone way up because many people, some of you maybe, moved out of the cities to live in a rural life because you can work anywhere you want. You don't have to work around anybody. You don't have to be around anybody. There are whole segments of society, and if you tend to be a person who's a little more on the introverted spectrum, this is going to be super attractive to you. But even if you aren't, the tendency just out of, for whatever reason, just fatigue or whatever, we're all kind of fulfilling the prophecy of that book written in nearly over 20 years ago called Bowling Alone, that is showing up in our society, that bowling leagues and all kinds of community organizations and churches are all down 30 to 40% of participants. People are going it alone. They're emotionally alone. And yet in the middle of all this, people are really struggling. People are struggling with, on one hand, they feel this reluctance to go out and mix it up with other people and to be in community with other people with all that goes with it. The other hand, they're incredibly lonely and feeling isolated. So if you are going to follow Jesus, you're going to have to choose a life in community, not just as a kind of cute idea, a practical life in community over your isolation. I heard somebody talking about this the other day. They said they agreed to go to some community event, and I understand this. And then as you get ready to do it, you're tired and you say, "Why did I agree to this? Why? What was I thinking?" And you talk yourself out of it, whether it's church or a concert or dinner, and then you go, and later you say, "Wow, I'm really glad I went." Maybe it wasn't even the content or the sermon or anything, or even the event. It was just something there, being with people. And then you start the whole process over again next time, right? And yet, like I said, 63% of Americans list loneliness as the single biggest mental health issue. People spend 1/3 of the time with friends in person nowadays, even with family. And I haven't even talked anymore about the fact that there are huge swaths, 25% of the population of 18 to 35-year-olds are estranged from their parents. So this issue of trying to live this kind of individualistic, isolated life is really not the life of a disciple. Jesus called disciples not a disciple. You are you think about all of the pictures in the Bible of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. You are called as a part of a new family of God. You came from a biological family, but now you have a new family in the kingdom. You are part of a new body of believers, and every part of the body has its place. You are part of a new temple that is built up of living stones, and they're all put together in combination for strength. We are called to live in a diverse community life with each other, where people who are annoying and different and have different political ideas and different opinions and different traditions and different backgrounds. And it forces us, we choose to do that so that we can learn how to live together and love on a whole nother level with people we would never be around. 1 Corinthians 12:12 says, "For even as the body is one, and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body. So also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether slaves or free, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, we were all made to drink of one Spirit." Let me just say this. You talk about being consciously putting yourself with people who are very, very different. There's nothing in that first century time period that was more different than Jews and Greeks separate apart. Or slaves and free, property and property owner on the class level. What I'm trying to tell you is, it was intentional to put yourself within a body of people very, very different. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot says, "Because I am not a hand, I am not a part of the body," is it for this reason any less a part of the body? And if the ear says, "Because I am not an eye, I am not a part of the body," it is not for this reason any less a part of the body. The whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But now God has placed his members, each one of them, in the body just as he desired. If they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members, but one body. And so this is the idea that you are to be the more different ages, the more different backgrounds, the more distinct and different people can be fitting in. That's what the body is. And they need to be together for the purpose of loving each other. People say to me, well, I don't have to go to church to encounter God. I want to do it out in nature. And I said, that's true, but that's not the purpose of church. Purpose of church is to learn to love other people as you love God. This is a passage that's used a lot. And a man who's passed on, gone to be with the Lord, always pointed this verse out to me about how to cultivate faithfulness as a follower of Jesus. Hebrews 10:23. You got to remember, there was a lot of tension. The book of Hebrews was written because a lot of the Jewish believers who had been saved, had turned to Christ early on out of Judaism, were now in churches. And the churches were beginning to fill up with Gentiles. They were very uncomfortable, and it was one of the reasons why they began to defect and go back to Judaism, was because they didn't really love hanging around all these liberal, or whatever you would want to call them, pagans, that had come out of these wild backgrounds. And so in Hebrews 10:23, the writer of Hebrews says this: let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. This is really important to remember. We can easily waver. We have to hold fast because he is faithful. And then he says, let us consider. That means you and I, how often do you do that? Sit down and think about, how can I help the people in my life? How can I stimulate them or spur them, like push them a little bit to love better and do good things, to do good deeds. Consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. Do you do that? Do you just say, I'm not going, or, I don't feel like it? Or if you do go, you're like, you're just in and out as fast as you possibly can. And then this passage, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some. By the way, your own church. Now, if TFBC isn't your church, you need to be a part of a church and be committed to it, not just bouncing around or interneting around, but not forsaking our own assembling together. If this is your church, you made a commitment to it. And if you're a member of TFBC, you did make a commitment. You may not remember it, but you did, to be faithful and usable and teachable and generous, etc., etc. But do not forsake your own assembling, as is the habit of some. It's a habit. And bad habits easily come on, and good habits take real effort. Did you know that when they survey people and ask you, are you a regular church attender? People will say yes. And you know what that means for most of them? They go once every 8 weeks to their own church. And then when they ask people, are you a weekly church attender? People will say, oh, I'm a weekly church attender. But in reality, when they check out what they actually do, their schedule, it's once a month on average. And in their minds, they really think of themselves as regular. They really think of themselves as weekly. But in the practice of their life, their schedule of their life, they've gotten in a habit of not going. I'm totally into church except for sports this weekend, and I'm going camping then, and I'm doing this, and then I'm doing that, and then it's Christmas time, and then it's Halloween, and then it's whatever. And so all these other things take priority, and so it becomes a habit. But instead of doing that, if you want to not waver, if you want to go on as a flourishing follower of Jesus, you have to not forsake your own assembling, and break that habit. And habits are hard to break. You have to have practice to overcome bad habits. But encouraging one another all the more as you see the day drawing near. In sports, if you get a bad habit, you got to practice to break the habit. And then, this is why this is so important, because Hebrews 3:13 says, but encourage one another, give courage, parakaleo, call each other beside each other, connect with each other day after day, as long as it's still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Sin will take you out. And so day by day, stay connected with each other. Now, not one of these metaphors about what it means to be a part of a community, a church, is done by itself. 59 one another commands, almost all of them need to be done with other people. The second thing you have to choose, and you're going to have to choose this. This will not be chosen for you or your family. You have to choose community over your illusions and your idealism. And you have to choose the reality, a real community over your illusions. Here's the thing. Why do you need to be a part of a local church? Because it's so that you can learn to love real people. We don't get to love ideal people or our ideal of people or our ideal of a church. We get to love people, real people. We don't get to love our illusion of community, but community. One a writer said, they asked a monk, well, what is your lifestyle? How do you live out this life? And he says, we stumble and we get back up. We stumble and we get back up. We stumble and we get back up. And I would amend it and say, we stumble and we help each other get back up. That's what the Bible teaches. Brethren, even if anyone is caught in a trespass, Galatians 6:1, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one of you looking to yourself, so that you too will not be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. You cannot do that off on your own with no real connection to people. You can't do it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote that book, The Life Together. And one of the things he says, one of the great threats to any community is the person who lives with an illusion, where they basically let their pure ideals become the enemy of real love. But then there's a third choice that you're going to have to make. And this choice I said, of loving not your illusions, but real community. You have to choose it for yourself. And you must also choose community over being a customer. And I know this is really going to bite a little bit, but it's true. And for some of you that are pastors that maybe see this, and I speak as a pastor, 40 some years, we have so much pressure to be pushed into this idea of like marketing ourselves all the time. There's all kinds of well-intended advice that is completely anti-Christ. You must break the consumer focus out of your life. And churches have got to get out of this. We've got to get out of this idea of thinking and being trained and training people not to think like this. What do I get out of this? Or what do my kids get out of this? Or what does this church have for me? But not what do I get, but what can I give? Not what can you do for me or my family, but what can I do for you? I think this is so, Jesus said the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. And the average church, especially an American Christian parishioner, is like, isn't that cute? But listen, you know how that applies? What does this church really need? They probably need me. It would be much funner if I did something different. I think I just want to really encourage you in this area not to be a consumer. Right now, after the pandemic, 38% of pastors across all denominations either quit or retired. Approximately 30 to 40% of church attendance dropped out. And so a lot of pressure is on churches. And, the churches that seem to be holding their own are the mega churches that have 1,500 to 2,000 in attendance, because they run a consumer, they have ministries, a jumpy house for the little kids, they have pastors for everything. They have all kinds of cool stuff that appeal to the one-stop shopper. And then there's a little church that is like 90% of all churches in America, 75 or under. They have the appeal of everybody knows each other and they have this connection. But churches that are in between, kind of like TFBC, that are, somewhere between 200 maybe and 300, and it depends on the weekend, it could be more, it could be less. But they are the ones that have a struggle. They don't have the everybody's in each other's life connection, but they also can't run. They can't run the full one-stop shop. And so this is where, and And a lot of times the mega churches are just draining out the medium-sized churches from their communities. And this is not a healthy thing because it takes many expressions. And what oftentimes the mega churches do, they do a lot of really great stuff, but they don't, but they do train people in like how to be a consumer, how to be a Christian consumer, the coolest, the best, the biggest, the brightest, whatever. And here's what Jesus said, if you're going to be his disciples. And he was saying to them all, and this applies to all of us, if anyone wishes to come after me, anyone must deny himself and take up his cross daily, and follow me. Now, in today's language, people would add, as long as you get what you want and your kids get what they want and it's not uncomfortable and it fits your schedule and whatever your cultural identity is, right? But that's not what he said. If anyone wishes to come after me, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. And Luke 9:24 says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Now, if you wish to save your life, hold on to yourself and get what you want, you're going to lose it. But whoever loses his life, for my sake, he is the one who will save it. For what is a man profited if he gains everything, which by the way, you won't, and you forfeit, you lose yourself? Now, what we would change it to is this, whoever is wishes to save his life will get what they deserve. And, whoever loses his life, as long as it's convenient and doesn't interfere with other things, they can follow me. But that's not what Jesus called us to. Anyone wants to follow him. This is a fake gospel idea that's crept in. And it happened because 50 plus years ago, the church growth movement began to teach people, hey, the goal is to fill your building full of people. So what they began to do is market by affinity. So they aimed at certain groups, certain class of people, certain age of people. So you have churches that they all are kind of a monolith rather than the body. And it is easy to get people, all the cowboys or all the truckers or all the bikers, and it works. But it isn't a reflection of the community that body is in. So what is the cross Jesus talks about? If anyone will come after me, they must take up their cross, not his cross. His cross was once for all time, but your cross-shaped assignment. Well, Paul explains it. I think Paul explained it when he said in Colossians 1:24 about himself, now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I do my share on behalf of his body, which is the church, in filling up what was lacking in the afflictions of Christ. Now, he wasn't saying that the work of Christ was inadequate, but he's saying in helping people become everything they are to become, there's some pain, there's some filling up, there's some suffering, there's a cross. And this is what you and I must choose if we're going to follow and flourish in him. This is why we must work to walk together. This works up against our individualistic bent of what do I get out of it, and I don't want to be inconvenienced. And I don't want to be bothered. But you can't do this. You can't really practice in a way to bend you away from that individualistic, selfish part, consumer part. You can't do this without being committed to life in community. This is what Jesus chose. He chose this way for us to live. This is what it means to be his disciple. And you must choose his way also. And so you say, well, how? And this is why I'm saying to you, this whole idea of, there's a lot of excuses get made for outreach. We're all outreach. But one of the things that Jesus taught was in reach ends up being outreach, because by this all men know you are my disciples, that you love one another as I have loved you. So what do you do? What is your practice that you can do? Well, number one, this is a choice you can make. Make gathering each Sunday a priority value for you and your family. Every Sunday, not a mythological, idealized Sunday schedule, but the real one. Make being in a class or a small group part of your schedule. Go to a Sunday school class. Go to breakfast and sit around a table with people and get around God's word and get to know and hear people's sorrows and weep with those who weep and and rejoice with those who rejoice. Or go to one of the Wednesday night or small group or young adult group or youth group, whatever. Make sure it happens. It's not going to fit your schedule. Make it part of your schedule. And then look for ways to serve the body. Don't try and find an ideal church or the cool church or one that has, the jumpy house for your kid or the water park, but one that will stretch you to love people. And remember that loyalty doesn't mean anything until it's tested. You can make all kinds of commitments. You can make all kinds of promises, but it's when it's tested, when you feel like quitting and giving up and, going someplace funner, that's when loyalty becomes real or not. It's what you do then. So how do you flourish and follow Christ as his disciple? Well, these three choices, and these are choices that you're going to have to make for yourself. You are going to have to, as I said, you are going to have to choose community over isolation. It's not going to be easy for some of you. You've gotten kind of comfortable in your little cave. You're going to have to choose community over illusions. Like trying to find the perfect community. You're not going to find it. Find a normal one with normal people that have normal problems that you can do something for them. And then you're going to have to choose community over being a customer. You are not a customer. You are a Christ follower. You are an apprentice of Christ who he came not to be served, but to give his life as a ransom for many. If you want to be great with him, you got to do that. So thank you for watching this. Remember, this Sunday, we're going to be talking about having a heart for Christ. And you know what Jesus had a heart for? If you want to have a heart like his, you're going to have a heart for children. And we're going to set up and talk about what it means to really be a church that has a heart for children. TFBC has had that for years, and we're really refocusing on that. We have VBS, so that starts Vacation Bible School 9 a.m. on Monday. There's an adult class I'm going to teach every day. You can come to that. You can put your kids in there. We got nursery if you come to my class. We got preschool all the way up to 5th grade. All right, and it's a really fun time, no cost. And then coming up, and so remember that. And then on the 30th, we're going to have a big celebration with all those kids, and we'll have one service at 11, and we'll have Sunday school around the tables. But you could still be there for that. Let me just tell you, bring kids, invite kids, welcome people. I'd love to have you, and I'd love to see you in my class on Sunday morning. I have a class. We have 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock services. Baptism in the river after the 11 o'clock service. And then we will have, we're going to have our class. There's lots of great adult classes and kids classes all at 9:30 and breakfast. So make this a part of your schedule. Listen, we want you to be part. And for you to go on and follow and flourish, you're going to need it. God bless you.